Gotcha. Yep, you got us right back on track, I suppose. We're talking about
I know.
Mystery Adamsville, available October 1st. Make sure you get your copy.
Good, Adamsville. Come to the book release party and talk to me about ghosts, please. I will talk about it all day.
That's going to be at Kids Inc. right here in Indianapolis.
So there's two actually. There's one on the 1st is going to be at Barnes & Noble in Greenwood at 7 p.m. And then there's another one that's going to be at Kids Inc. on the 17th at 6:30, I believe. So I'm actually doing two. So if you can't come to the one on the 1st, you can come to the one, yes, on the 17th at 6:30 at Kids Inc. So there's two chances to see me.
Kids Inc. Special shout out to, I never want to say the best bookstore. What kind of author suicide would that be? But one of my favorite bookstores in Indianapolis is Kids Inc. They always throw such a nice party. It's a good crowd. I've lost track of how many launch parties I've gone to there, but all the best ones.
I have actually, this will be my first time going there, so I'm very excited.
Oh, you're in for a treat, my friend.
No, I'm so excited. So
Miss Mullen puts on a heck of a show.
Oh yes. Oh man, I'm ready for that.
And occasionally, not always, but sometimes Mike Mullen comes by and busts a brick with his bare hands. So fingers crossed.
I saw the rest of his like presentation that he does for schools at a Barnes & Noble one time, but he didn't have his brick with him. Oh. So maybe I should make a special request to be like, can Mike bring the brick?
I've seen him do it 5 or 6 times, and like the first couple times it was impressive, but then I started rooting for the brick not to break because that's infinitely more entertaining for me. That he just smacks his hand and then he has to look around embarrassed. One more time.
Yeah. Like, you weakened it the first time. It doesn't mean anything now. Yeah.
It's a great ploy. It made me wish that I could break bricks, because then he takes the 2 pieces and he signs them both and he gives them out to 2 kids in the audience.
That's so good.
That's thinking, dude.
That Mike Mullen, he's a smart guy.
Well, here's my promise to esteemed audience. There is no way we're going the rest of this conversation without more ghost talk. But we're going to talk a little bit more book, and then we'll get back to it.
Yes.
So let's start with, what to talk about with this book. Well, let's talk about, you and I were on a panel once upon a time. And we were both asked, why is Indiana a great place to write about? And of course, we said because we're at an Indiana conference and y'all want to hear that it is. But we both agreed that Indiana is a great place for horror stories. So why is that, and why have you chosen to set your horror story in Indiana?
First of all, I think all horror stories should take place in Indiana. I've been wondering about this because, obviously I've lived here my whole life, and for most of my life, I was terrified of everything. I think it's because it has that kind of, like, Stephen King, like, rural / suburban Maine feel when he gets into, like, Salem's Lot and all that stuff, where it's just, you have all these small towns, they can be pretty sleepy, and people don't think about it a lot. People outside of Indiana don't tend to think about Indiana very often. And so it's like...
Whereas I just can't stop thinking about Illinois. Sorry.
I know, right? Like, actually, I do think about Illinois a lot, because I heard once that people from Illinois... Sorry, anybody from Illinois who believes this isn't true, but I heard that people from Illinois use the term Hoosier as an insult. And I was like, well... Done with you, Illinois. All right.
Illinois has been good to me. I was able to drive over and visit the set both of Man of Steel and Batman Begins. So, all right, Illinois.
Okay, Illinois. All right, that's not too bad.
Pretty cool.
I think, for me, Indiana is a great setting for horror stories because we have the combination. I think it's the utility of it. Like, we have the combination of a city, but also a lot of rural, like, farmland. We have these wide open spaces where it's still a little bit country, but in a lot of places, people like to think that we are cultured and great. And it's like, We're not Southern, but
Well, that's one of the things I like about it is because I get away with passing myself off as cultured because you don't know Indiana folk.
No?
Could be.
You don't know. Yeah, whatever. It's like, okay, so at the Indiana Authors Award, I gave a speech about liminal spaces. And how Indiana feels like a liminal space to me. So a liminal space, for anybody who doesn't know, is a space where it's like between worlds. So basically it's like, it's a space that you should only pass through and never stay in for a long period of time. So for example, like airports are liminal spaces. So that's why it can feel very strange to spend a large amount of time in an airport, because it's not a space that you're supposed to stay in. It's why it can feel, it's that feeling that you get when you're in your high school after hours and nobody's around and you're like, oh, this is not a place I'm supposed to be at this time of day. And there's no one here and this feels very strange. That's a liminal space. And so for me, Indiana is, the whole state feels like a liminal space. It's like this place that it's like people, I never thought of it as people staying here. It's like you could be born here and then you leave, or you're born somewhere else and you come here for a little while and then you leave. You pass through because, we're the crossroads of America. But it has that weird quality of seeming like this place where you can suddenly be alone in the middle of nowhere and there's just cornfields all around you. And you know that there's something out there, like, that there are people around, but you can't see them and you don't know where they are. And you're like, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be here. And so it can just give you that real creeped out feeling of just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And we have a lot of great, like, rundown farmhouses and, again, cornfields, woods, just all kinds of great stuff.
You can hear whispers through the corn. Beware his righteous judgment. Oh no!
I want to know, why do you think it's great for writing horror?
Well, now that's the smartest answer I ever heard. A liminal space. Oh my God, that's going in my next Indiana horror story. I'll thank you in the back, but I'm totally passing that off as my original thought. That's great.
Please do have at it.
No, I agree. There is just a wealth of creepy things and haunted people, good people. I like Indiana people. We're salt of the earth. Vonnegut called us freshwater people, which I like the sound of that. That's nice. Yeah, freshwater nice. People.
Yeah.
And very funny and surprisingly progressive. You see the state, not to get into politics, but you see us light up bright red. And you think, well, that must be us. We know those people. They're here. And yeah, okay, we at one point we were the head of the Ku Klux Klan, but there are also all kinds of great people here.
Right. Oh God, that's not gonna. Oh, we're sorry. We apologize. It's not great, but yeah, there are a lot of people, and I like you said, like, there are haunted people here, good people, but haunted people, and I think that was another thing with, like, Adamsville. It was just like, living here my whole life. It's like you see these people, and like sometimes you get raised this way where it's kind of like everybody has their issues, right? And you're kind of raised in this way to not talk about things, and so you can know that somebody is a certain way or they have a certain personality, but you don't necessarily know why. Like, you don't know their backstory. There's something there. And so it's just kind of, sometimes you can see these people that you're like, I know who you are as a person, but I don't really understand you. And in that way, they can kind of feel like ghosts too. It's like, I know you're here, but I don't know what you want. And that's, or what you want or what you've been through, or, that kind of thing. But yeah, there's so many opportunities here. I think it helps that it feels relatively unplumbed in terms of horror stories. I mean, now we have, like,
that around, my friend.
Turning that around. I was going to say, now we have, like, Stranger Things and stuff. Stranger Things weirdly doesn't feel like an Indiana. It kind of does, maybe it's because it's set in the 80s and I was not alive in the 80s, but like it feels like it could be any like, Midwestern setting to me. Like it's not Indiana specific. Which is fine.
Stranger Things. Just know that, esteemed audience, before I say what I'm about to say, because I do like the show.
Yeah.
But it's like a non-Hoosiers idea of what Indiana is. You don't know.
Yeah.
And it's also what a person that remembers the 80s and has read a lot of books about the 80s. It's their idea of the 80s, because I was alive, albeit very young, during the 80s. And like, you watch the show and they've all got their Ghostbuster costumes and everybody's got the cars that are specific to like that year or 2 years before. Like, get out of here. People didn't have that kind of money in the 80s.
Right.
They had cars that were 10, 20 years old.
Yeah, they had cars from the 60s.
They're still walking around in bell bottoms.
Yeah, exactly. Like nobody, it's like, and I feel like that might be like were these people from like LA or New York who made this, who were like on the coasts? And so where things like, go through faster, because it's like, you're in Indiana, buddy. Like that does not happen here. But yeah, exactly.
It's just changed our time zones. Like 5-7 years ago, somewhere in there.
Oh my God, yeah.
We went to Eastern time. At one point, I remember the West Wing made a joke about it. It was a whole episode was about when you drove through Indiana, you could go through 3 or 4 different time zones.
I was laughing so hard during that episode. That was one of my favorite episodes of that show.
They trolled us and we had it coming. Like, yeah,
I loved it. Oh my God. But yeah, and like, oh, what was I just gonna say? So when I think of Stranger Things, is like I do enjoy that show, but it doesn't feel like an Indiana show. It feels just like a Midwestern show. But then I think of something like Parks and Rec, and I'm like, that is Indiana to a T. Like, God, that feels like Indiana. I love that show so much, partly because it is Indiana. I don't know who they had working on that show. I don't know who they consulted, if they consulted anybody, but that is like the Pawnee Eagleton like conflict. Maybe it's because I'm a South Sider, but I'm like, man, Eagleton is the North Side. Like,
there are 2 towns anywhere are in conflict, and I'm a bad person because I'm now working in the school system that was against Lebanon. I'm not going to say what. I don't want to break that rivalry, but I have become a turncoat in my old age.
Yeah, that's like me, because I like we had a conflict with another high school, and it's like, man, if I ever end up having to work for them or anything, it's like I will have betrayed everything I stood for. So yeah, it's that kind of difference. So I don't remember where this started, but anytime I can write an Indiana story, I do it. And anytime I can write an Indiana story and actually make it feel like Indiana, I do it. So like, and I feel like they've gotten progressively more Indiana as I've gone on, because I feel like Made You Up, it was set in Indiana, but it wasn't like a whole lot about the setting. Eliza was a little bit more, and then Now Entering Adamsville is like, this is my ode to Indiana and its creepiness and its people and all the things I love about it. There's a line in Adamsville where I say that the town, like Zora says something about the town being like Connor Prairie for the afterlife. And the copy editors were like, should you keep this in there? Because we didn't know what this was. We had to look it up to see that it was a living history museum. Are your readers going to know what this is? Like, should you just say like Living History Museum for the Afterlife or something? And I was like, no, it's an Indiana book. We're saying Connor Prairie. Like, people from Indiana will get it and they'll love it. And people who aren't from Indiana can look it up or get it from context clues. But
I also featured Connor Prairie in 2 of my stories without blinking an eye. Like, if you don't know it, find out. It's awesome.
Find out. It's great. It's amazing. They won't break character for anything.
Oh, it's great. It's like the guards of the London, where they stand there and you can yell in their face and they don't do anything. You can wave your cell phone in the face of the Connor Prairie performers.
They do not break character. I
got a demon. Nope, nothing.
Nope. Better exercise that. Let's call the priest. Yeah, like
I also love that Indiana is so very, very religious. You know, we're in the Bible Belt, and there are whole stretches of it that we've got plenty of heathens. Don't worry about that, non-Hoosiers.
right.
But if you're writing a horror story, something that I complain about in other horror stories is when they either leave out or minimize the religion. It's like, dude, you're talking about death.
Right.
If that happened here, for
Mhm.
sure, somebody's going to try and make this a parable, and that's why you have to do what I say.
Right, exactly. Like, and like that was another thing in Adamsville that I was trying to like, because I have the pastor of the church is in there, and they go like they pass the church, they see the church, they go to the graveyard. They don't really. I wanted to bring up religion as more of a point in there, and unfortunately, there wasn't room in the story, and I was kind of bummed about it because I was like, there's a lot to think about here in terms of like because Zora can see ghosts, because she basically, the fire starters are basically demons, and she's not a particularly religious person, and nobody in her family is it really, and the fact that mom is missing, and she's dealing with like, is her mom still alive, is she not, there's so much there to think about in terms of like, how does Zora conceptualize religion? How does she work through these things? Does religion factor into it at all? Has she ever thought about, like, I thought about putting a scene in there where she like goes to the church and is considering like, praying or just talking to the pastor about something, and she would probably end up getting angry at some point and storming out, as she does. But it was something that I thought about putting in there and there just wasn't space for it, unfortunately. But yeah, it's entirely something that I think is, important to, especially somewhere like when you're set in Indiana, because it is such a big thing. Even for a character who's not religious, when you're dealing with these paranormal elements and death and all this stuff, it's like, even your less religious people are gonna consider it.
Well, and in Indiana, I mean, the ghost or entity could come to life and say, "This is Buddha. For sure, I'm Buddha doing a magic thing." In Indiana, people be like, "I'm pretty sure it's Jesus."
Pretty sure it's Jesus. This is Jesus, actually. Yes, exactly.
And now we've offended all our fellow Hoosiers. Good times. All right.
Friends.